Once upon a time, in the bustling heart of Enugu, a city where red dust kissed the rooftops and the Okada men shouted louder than car horns, lived a man called Chitty Martins. He was no more than 35, with shoulders broad like a farmer's barn and a face that always seemed to carry the weight of something unspoken. His skin was the color of roasted palm kernels, and his eyes, deep and watchful, rarely blinked when he listened. He was the kind of man you could pass every day and never notice. Not because he was invisible, but because people chose not to see him. You see, Chitty was a butcher, not the proud kind you find in shiny supermarkets oozing cold air and plastic packaging. No, Chitty's stall was tucked beside Uwani Market, where the flies danced in circles, the women haggled with heavy Igbo accents, and the air was thick with a blend of fresh pepper, dried crayfish, and the unmistakable stench of raw meat under a punishing sun. Every morning by 4:30 a.m., Chitty would arrive at the abattoir behind Engwo Bridge. There, wearing his blood-stained apron and rubber boots with holes in them, he would drag the carcass of a goat or cow across the wet concrete, humming lowly to himself, the same song his late mother used to sing while plaiting his hair as a child. He never smiled, not because he didn't want to, but because smiling had become a luxury he could no longer afford. Chitty Martins had a secret, one so deep, so painfully buried, even he sometimes doubted it was ever real. There were nights, cold, quiet nights, when he would stare at the cracked ceiling of his one-room apartment and whisper to the darkness, "If only they knew who I really was." But no one cared to know. In the market, the traders mocked him. "Chitty, your meat 2-day tough. Na goat way run marathon before e die." Some of the younger girls would laugh behind his back, holding their noses exaggeratedly as they passed by. Even the children called him Uncle Goat Smell. But Chitty didn't respond. He would wipe his hands on the same faded towel he always kept tucked into his waistband, adjust his knife belt, and return to his chopping board. The truth? He wasn't always like this. Just 10 years ago, Chitty Martins was sitting in the back seat of a tinted black Range Rover, sipping Hollandia yogurt and talking about stock options with a foreign accent. He wore Italian suits, ate at hotels where the napkins were folded like swans. He was the heir to the Martins dynasty, a family whose name once opened doors in the oil industry like magic, until something happened, something no one in Enugu ever suspected, something that stripped him of his wealth, his title, and everything he thought he knew about love and loyalty. The first time Adaora, the pepper seller, noticed him was on a Tuesday morning. The clouds were gray that day, and a stubborn drizzle fell like tears that refused to be wiped. "Chitty, a beg, dash me one bone for my dog Na," she teased, stretching her long fingers across the wooden counter. He didn't look up. He just muttered, "Take. But next time, bring change." Adaora smiled. "USEF. Na so you day vex every day? You be native doctor." A flash of something, maybe amusement, flickered in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. That was the first time someone had spoken to him like a human being in months. Later that evening, as the market wound down and traders packed their goods into sacks and wheelbarrows, Chitty sat on an overturned crate, washing his knives one by one. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with dampness. His shirt clung to his back, and the rusting lantern beside him cast long shadows on the wall. He looked up at the sky and whispered again, like a ritual, "If only they knew who I really was." But just as he whispered, a figure appeared in the darkness. A tall man in a suit, too clean for this kind of place, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though the sun had long disappeared. The man stopped beside Chitty's stall. He didn't say anything. Chitty froze. The two stared at each other for a long moment. Then the man whispered a name that hadn't been spoken to Chitty in almost a decade. "Obiajalu sends his regards." Chitty's heart stopped. His hand trembled. And in that one moment, the past he had tried to bury under blood-stained aprons and goat bones began to rise again. The sky had darkened, and the lantern beside Chitty Martins flickered like it, too, was afraid. That man, the one in the black suit, still hadn't moved. His voice, though calm, cut through the night like a machete through ripe plantain. "Obiajalu sends his regards." And just like that, everything Chitty had buried rushed back. the private jet hangars, the villa in Banana Island, the laughter of someone he once called brother, the betrayal that turned his life upside down. Chitty stood slowly, wiping his wet hands on his apron, then glanced left and right. The market was almost empty now, save for one or two Malamai pushing wheelbarrows, and a few traders locking up their stalls. He locked eyes with the stranger. His voice came out low, cautious. "Who are you?" The man smiled. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and dropped a small, folded piece of paper onto Chitty's wooden table, stained with dried blood and goat hair. "Midnight. Tomorrow. Old Martin's warehouse. Come alone." Then, as silently as he had arrived, he disappeared into the shadows. Chitty stared at the paper. His hands shook. The Old Martin's warehouse? That place had been locked for years. After the fire. After the scandal. After Obiajalu. Suddenly, it felt like the air itself had thickened. The smell of raw meat turned to ash in his nostrils. His heart beat faster than it had in years. That night, sleep refused to come. Chitty lay on his worn mattress, staring at the ceiling, his body stiff from tension. The ceiling fan above him creaked with every turn, like it was mocking his unrest. He thought about Obiajalu, once his closest cousin, more like a brother, the only other boy raised in the Martins' mansion after their fathers merged their companies. They had grown up together, eating Quobi by the pool, racing power bikes through the streets of Lekki, laughing like kings who thought the world would never end. Until that night, the night when Chitty's entire world collapsed in flames. By morning, the skies were clear again. The city buzzed like it always did, loud, colorful, unbothered by one man's torment. At the market, no one could tell that the butcher had barely slept. He wore the same apron, the same expression. But inside, something had changed. He was quieter, more alert. Every time a stranger passed by, his eyes followed. Ada Ora noticed. "Chitty, are you okay?" she asked as she placed a basket of red peppers beside his stall. He nodded once. "I'm fine." But she didn't believe him. By noon, the sun was high, and the smell of fresh meat filled the air like a blanket of flies. Chitty chopped slowly, lost in thought. The knife made heavy sounds on the thick wooden board. Thump, thump, thump. "Why now?" he whispered to himself. Why after all these years? He had built this quiet life from scratch. Not because he loved blood or sweat or the way people looked at him with pity, but because he needed to hide. Because no one ever suspects the butcher. Later that evening, he closed up early. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. As he walked home, he passed the church by Ogui Road, where a night vigil was just starting. He paused. For the first time in years, he entered the church. The voices of worshippers echoed as they prayed, cried, shouted. Chitty found a quiet corner at the back. He didn't kneel. He didn't cry. He just whispered, "God, if I survive tomorrow night, I'll stop running." Midnight came too fast. The old Martin's warehouse stood at the edge of town, surrounded by tall grass and broken streetlights. The metal gate creaked open as Chitty stepped inside. Dust danced in the moonlight. The air smelled of old concrete and secrets. He held a small flashlight. His knife, his sharpest one, was tucked into his boot. Then, from the shadows, a voice called out, "You still know how to show up, cousin." Obiajalu stepped forward, wearing white agbada, rings on every finger, eyes filled with something that looked like hatred or guilt. 10 years, Chitty, and you never came looking for the truth." Chitty didn't move. His jaw clenched. Then he asked the question that had been haunting him for a decade. "Did you do it?" Obiajalu smiled, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer and whispered, "You've been hiding for 10 years. But what if I told you someone else has been hiding too?" Chitty blinked. "What do you mean?" Obiajalu leaned in. His voice dropped. "She's alive, Chitty. Amaka didn't die in the fire." The moment Obiajalu said her name, Chitty's entire body locked. Amaka. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 10 years. Not even in dreams. Because Chitty Martins didn't dare dream about the dead. Amaka was supposed to be gone. Gone in that warehouse fire. The one that took his future, his inheritance, and the last soft part of his heart. He remembered the last time he saw her. She was wearing a red blouse, gold earrings shaped like tiny suns, and that smell, that soft, sweet mix of coconut oil and garden eggs, still lingered in his mind like a haunting lullaby. She had kissed him goodbye and said, "Come back for me tonight. Promise me." He had promised. But when he came back, all he found was flames, and ashes, and Obiagelu, crying crocodile tears with a crowd. Now, here stood Obiagelu, grinning like the devil himself. "She didn't die, Chitty," he said again. "They only wanted you to think she did." "Who is they?" Chitty's voice cracked. Obiagelu stepped back, arms crossed. "The same people who took your father's company. The same ones who turned you into a butcher." Chitty's fist tightened. "Why didn't you tell me? Why now?" Obiagelu smirked. "Because now it matters. You've been quiet for too long, and now they know you're still alive." Chitty's flashlight flickered. A rat scurried across the floor. The whole warehouse suddenly felt colder, not from weather, but from truth. "Where is she?" Chitty asked, his voice low and dangerous. Obiagelu didn't answer. Instead, he threw a brown envelope onto the dusty floor. It slid to Chitty's feet. Inside were pictures. Chitty picked them up with trembling fingers. One showed a woman standing by a roadside suya joint in Abuja. Another showed her entering a small flat with a toddler. Her face was turned slightly away, but Chitty knew those cheekbones, that posture, even after a decade. His breath caught in his throat. It was her. Older, thinner, but alive. Amaka was alive, and she had a child. Chitty stared at the photos for a long time. "Why are you showing me this now?" Obiagelu's smile faded. "Because you need to get to her before they do. She's in danger." Chitty's eyes narrowed. "From who?" Obiagelu hesitated, then said two words that hit Chitty like a sledgehammer. "Uncle Natazi." Now, that name meant danger. Natazi Martins, their late father's business partner, and the man who inherited everything after the fire. He was cold, calculating, the kind of man who smiled while ordering your death over a glass of aged whiskey. Chitty had always suspected he had a hand in the fire, but no proof, no voice. Until now. Chitty shoved the photos into his pocket. "If she's in danger, I'm going to her." Obiagelu blocked his path. "You can't go yet. They're watching every move you make now. You go running to her, they'll know she's still alive. And this time, they'll finish the job." Chitty's chest rose and fell with rage. "Then what do you want me to do? Sit back? Wait." Obiagelu stepped closer. "No, cousin. You're going to play their game. You're going to make them think you're still the poor butcher who smells of goat. While we tear them down from the inside." Outside, the wind howled through the broken windows. Thunder rolled far in the distance. Something was coming, and Chitty could feel it. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was war, and it had already begun. By the time Chitty Martin stepped out of the warehouse, the rain had started to fall. Not heavy rain, just enough to soak your shoulders. Just enough to feel like the sky itself was weeping for something lost. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just walked, slowly, steadily, back to the only life people believed he had. Back to being the butcher. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the cracked windows of his room, Chitty sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the photo in his hand. Amaka. Her eyes were the same. Still soft. Still cautious. But different. There was weight behind them now, like someone who had seen the other side of survival and come back changed. And the boy beside her? Chitty's stomach twisted. Could it be? He counted backward in his head. The years. The timeline. The last night they were together. 10 years ago. The child in the photo looked just about the same age. He gripped the photo tighter. Is he mine? That morning at the market, everything felt louder. The traders shouted harder. The bus conductors insulted more creatively. The meat smelled stronger. But Chitty's mind was somewhere else. He chopped meat mechanically, barely listening as customers argued over prices. Then a black Prado Jeep pulled up across the road. Not unusual. Rich people came to Yuani Market sometimes, mostly to buy in bulk and show off their wealth. But this one didn't park. It just sat there, engine running, windows tinted, watching. Chitty noticed. So did Ada. Chitty, she said, brushing yam peels off her wrapper. That car has been there since morning. You know them? Chitty looked once, then returned to his chopping board. No. But inside, his nerves were crackling like hot oil. By noon, the Jeep was gone. Chitty slipped into the back alley and made a call on a tiny Nokia phone he hadn't used in years, one not connected to his name. Obiagelu answered on the second ring. They're watching already, Chitty said. That was fast. Obiagelu's voice was low. Then we move faster. Tonight, you're going to make them notice something else. Something they can't ignore. What? A pause. Your watch. That night, Obiagelu met him in a barber shop behind Cole Camp. No one went there except old men who still believed barbers should use razor blades and spirit. There, in the back room, Obiagelu handed Chitty a small black box. Inside was a gold Rolex. Not the kind from Balagan Market. The kind that whispers wealth without needing to shout. Chitty stared at it. You want me to wear this? Where? Tomorrow. Market. Let them see you. Let them wonder. Chitty shook his head. I'm a butcher. How would that make sense? Obiagelu smirked. Exactly. That's why it'll work. The next day, the sun blazed hot. The kind of heat that makes metal too hot to touch and turns beer into soup. Chitty arrived at the market the usual way. Same shirt, same knife, same tired eyes. Except this time, something glinted on his wrist. A golden watch. The people noticed. First the woman selling oranges across from him. Then the groundnut boys. Then Ada. Wait. Chitty, she said, squinting. Where you see watch like this? He looked at her once, wiped sweat from his brow, and muttered, Gift. Gift coup? From who? Queen of England. Others laughed, but not Ada. She looked again, harder. Something in her expression shifted, like she had just realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't know the man in front of her at all. By afternoon, rumors were flying. Maybe him Don Win bet 9 ja. Abi him day do Yahoo for night? Meat seller way wear Rolex? Something no day add up. Even the other butchers started whispering. But Chitty said nothing. He just kept cutting meat, slice by slice, pretending like he didn't hear the whispers. That night, Obiagelu sent a text. Hook baited. They've noticed. Tomorrow we move on to step 2. Get ready. Chitty stared at the message. His heart beat fast, not with fear this time, but with something more dangerous. Purpose. After 10 years of hiding, Chitty Martins was beginning to return. And the city that thought he was nobody was about to remember his name. There's something dangerous about a man who keeps quiet for too long. People assume he has nothing to say, but sometimes he's just waiting to say the right thing, to the right people, at the wrongest possible time. By now, the rumors in Yuani Market had grown legs and were running faster than a kiki escaping lasma. Chitty don blow. Dem say him get mansion for independence layout. Forget the smell. That man na coated big man. Chitty heard every word. He just didn't respond. But Ada was watching him differently now. The way women do when they're not sure if the man they ignored yesterday might actually be their destiny helper in disguise. Chitty, she said that afternoon, wiping sweat from her forehead with the end of her wrapper. You know, even tell me say your level don change. Chitty looked at her. The way you look at a childhood friend who never noticed you until your slippers turned into shoes. I didn't think it mattered. Ada raised an eyebrow. So now you day form mystery man? He smiled, just slightly. It was the first time he'd smiled in public in years. And it didn't go unnoticed. Later that evening, after the sun had dipped behind the corrugated zinc roofs and the traders were packing up, Chitty walked to a small internet cafe behind Mayor Market. There, in a cubicle that smelled of dust, fried akara, and computer heat, he logged in. Not to Facebook, not to WhatsApp, but to a banking portal. The moment his fingers danced across the keyboard and the screen loaded, a number appeared. 943,572,360 Nigerian Nairas. 943,572,360 Naira. Chitty stared at the screen. not out of shock, but out of memory. This was his money, hidden under another name, locked away after the fire, preserved by one of the few loyal people his father had trusted. For 10 years, Chitty had ignored it, left it untouched, like a part of himself he no longer deserved to access. But now the game was different. That night, he made 3 transactions. A quiet payment to a private investigator in Abuja, a wire transfer to Obiajalu, untraceable, offshore, and a third, to someone only listed as Mama N. After he was done, he logged out, stood up, and left. The cafe attendant looked at him strangely. "Brothers, your time never finished now. You still get 10 minutes. Chitty replied with a voice that didn't match his clothes. "Keep the rest." He walked into the night, and the attendant scratched his head. Who this butcher SEF? Meanwhile, deep in Independence layout, inside a mansion guarded by tall fences and quiet dogs, Uncle Nadazi was sipping cognac beside a fireplace. A younger man walked in, bald head, black shirt, eyes cold like freezer water. "Sir," he said, "we have a problem." Nadazi didn't look up. "What now?" "The boy, Chitty. He's resurfacing." That got his attention. Nadazi turned slowly, eyes sharp. "What do you mean resurfacing?" "He's a butcher. A nobody." The man stepped closer. "We tracked a gold Rolex scene on his wrist. Model 228398 TBR. Limited edition. Current value, 48 million naira. Nadazi's glass paused mid-air. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir. And we also noticed movement in the offshore account, the one his father opened before the accident." Nadazi stood up. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "So the goat seller has found his claws again." Back in his one-room apartment, Chitty lay on his mattress, hands behind his head, listening to the buzzing fan and the sound of distant generators. His mind wasn't here. It was in Abuja, with a woman who wore gold earrings shaped like suns, with a boy who might carry his blood. He closed his eyes, then whispered to himself, "No more running." The butcher had remembered who he was, and now, the hunter had become the storm. The next morning, Enugu was calm, too calm. The sun rose without argument. The birds chirped as if nothing was wrong, and the red dust swirled gently across Uwani Road like a lazy spirit. But inside Chitty Martin's, a war was building. He was sitting on a wooden bench outside his room, holding a nylon bag of akara and pap. The food was hot, but he hadn't touched it. His mind was already in Abuja. Somewhere in that massive, glittering city was Amaka, and a child. His child. A text came in from Obiajalu. Investigator confirmed sighting. Her name now is Mariam Okoye. Lives in Kubwa. She runs a tailoring shop. The boy's name is Ebube. He's 9. 9. Chitty read the message twice. Then once more. Then something inside him cracked. For 9 years, his son had grown up without him. 9 birthdays. 9 rainy seasons. 9 New Year's days. He clenched his jaw so tight his neck muscles twitched. He stood up and began to pack. But Obiajalu wasn't smiling. He stood in a compound behind an old mechanic shop, holding a cigarette between his fingers, staring at an envelope full of surveillance pictures. In them, Amaka, Ebube, and someone else. A man, tall, dark, always nearby. Obiajalu didn't like what he saw. He called Chitty. "Listen to me. I know your heart is pulling you to Abuja, but use your head. They want you to run blind. They want you to move fast and leave Enugu unguarded." Chitty didn't answer. Obiajalu continued. "While you're chasing Amaka, they'll come for your name, your memory, your life here. You have to trap them before they erase you again." That night, Chitty sat on his rooftop, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. He was torn in two. One part of him, the man who once wore suits and drove Range Rovers, wanted to charter a jet and go hold his son, protect Amaka, and burn down the past. But the other part, the butcher, the man who learned patience with blood on his hands and a knife by his side, that part knew better. And so, a plan was born. Step 1, smoke out the enemy. Chitty returned to the market the next day, but not to work. He walked in dressed in a crisp white shirt, dark shades, black jeans, and once again, that gold Rolex shining like Judgment Day. This time, the people didn't whisper. They stared. Some nodded. Others stepped back. But Ada Ora? She stood in front of her pepper stall, arms crossed. Chitty, who are you? He paused, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "You'll find out soon enough." Then he dropped a bundle of cash on her table, thick, rubber-banded notes. "For your brother's surgery. You mentioned it last year. I didn't forget." Ada Ora froze. The whole market did, and Chitty walked away. Across the street, inside a tinted Camry, a man with a scar above his eyebrow adjusted his earpiece. He muttered into a hidden mic, confirming target. "The butcher is back. Repeat, he's back, and he's loud." Later that evening, Obiagelu met Chitty at a secret location. A spare room above an old warehouse by Holy Ghost Park. He tossed Chitty a phone. "Your trap worked. They've begun following you openly. That means they're getting sloppy, which means they're nervous." Chitty leaned against the wall. "Good. Let them come." Obiagelu frowned. "They won't come for you first. They'll go after someone close. Someone vulnerable." Chitty's eyes narrowed. Ada Ora. At that exact moment, back at the market, Ada Ora was locking up her stall when two strange men approached her. They were smiling too wide, speaking too softly. One of them said, "Sister, you know that Chitty guy well? ABI? We're old friends. Just want to surprise him." Ada Ora stepped back slowly. "No, I don't know him like that." But her hands were already shaking, because now she knew. Chitty Martins wasn't just a man with a knife. He was a man with a story far bigger than anyone imagined. And now that story had put a target on her back. In life, sometimes you think you're just selling pepper, when in truth, you're holding a piece of someone's past, someone's pain, or someone's plan. And by the time you realize it, it's already too late. That evening, after the strange men walked away, Ada Ora didn't go home immediately. She stood frozen beside her stall, her wrapper damp with sweat. Even though the night breeze had started to blow, something was wrong, very wrong, and it had everything to do with Chitty Martins, the man who used to smell like goat meat, but now walked like someone who owned the street. Inside her head, memories began to stitch themselves together. The quiet way he used to count money, always exact. The time she joked about needing 200 Nigerian Nairas for pepper, and he gave her 20,000 Nigerian Nairas without blinking. The scar on his palm that looked oddly like a signature. She had seen it once, years ago, in a newspaper. And now, the Rolex, the cash donation, the silence. She wrapped her goods in nylon and left the market early. But she didn't go straight home. Instead, she walked to her uncle's small electronics repair shop in New Haven. Uncle Ikenna was an old man, bald, always smelling of engine oil and bitter leaf. "Ada Ora? You know day greet again?" he asked, adjusting his radio on the workbench. She sat down, still shaking. "Uncle, I need to ask you something. Serious." He leaned forward. "About man?" She nodded. "About Chitty Martins." At the sound of that name, her uncle's face shifted. Slightly. Just enough. Ada Ora noticed. "You know him?" she said slowly. Ikenna looked down at his screwdriver. "Ada, that name is not for small talk. Please, uncle. I need to know. I think something is happening around him. Something dangerous." He sighed, wiped his forehead, then finally spoke. "Your father once worked for the Martins family, years ago. That boy, Chitty, he used to play in our compound. You don't remember, but he gave you your first plastic cooking set." Ada Ora blinked. "What? You were 5. He was maybe 12. His father owned half the land in this area. But after the fire, everything ended. They said he died. But maybe the dead don't always stay buried." Ada Ora sat back in her chair, speechless. The boy who gave her toy spoons and cups was now the man handing her wads of cash and walking with shadows. At that exact moment, Chitty was watching her from across the street, not because he didn't trust her, but because he knew they were watching her now, too. He had followed the two strange men who approached her earlier. He knew their type. Clean shave. No smell. No names. Corporate mercenaries. And if they were circling Ada Aura, that meant only one thing. They believed she knew something, which meant it was time for Chitty to tell her the truth, or let her die in the dark. The next morning, just before sunrise, Chitty knocked on Ada Aura's door. She opened, eyes puffy, wrapper barely tied. "Chitty, we need to talk. Now." Without waiting for her to answer, he stepped inside and locked the door behind him. Ada Aura backed away slowly. You're not just a butcher, are you?" "No." "Then who are you?" He looked at her, and for the first time, he spoke the words he had buried for 10 long years. "I'm Chitty Martins, son of Chief Damien Martins, the boy whose family was burned out of power, the man they tried to kill, and the father of a son I've never met." Ada Aura gasped, but Chitty wasn't finished. "You're in danger because of me, and I need your help before they come for someone else." Ada Aura didn't move, didn't blink. Then, quietly, she said, "Tell me what to do. Because sometimes, the pepper seller isn't just a market woman. She's a shield, a witness, a storm in waiting. There's something powerful about a woman who says, 'Tell me what to do,' because it means she's no longer afraid. And fear is the only thing that ever truly kept enemies safe." That morning, the sun rose over Enugu with a kind of quiet tension. The usual market chaos was still there. Shouting traders, honking kiki drivers, flies dancing above the fish sellers. But beneath it all, something had changed. Ada Aura wasn't just a pepper seller anymore. She was now a player in a dangerous game, and the next move belonged to her. Inside her small room, Chitty laid out the plan. He spoke like a soldier, calm, direct, no wasted words. "Ada Aura, they think you know something. That means they'll come for you. They'll want to scare you first, test your reactions." She nodded slowly, tying her wrapper tighter. "So what do we do?" Chitty handed her a tiny black earpiece, the kind you only see in spy movies or behind-the-scenes footage of politicians. "You wear this. Obiagelu will be listening. I need you to act normal. Go to the market. Let them come to you. We need to find out who they are and who they're working for." Ada Aura hesitated. "Act normal? With killers watching me?" Chitty looked her in the eyes. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't trust you." Her breath caught. Then she nodded. "Let's finish what they started." By 9:45 a.m., Ada Aura was back in her stall, laying out her tomatoes, peppers, and onions like it was just another Wednesday. But inside, her heart was beating like a talking drum. Behind her scarf, the earpiece buzzed once. Obiagelu's voice, crisp and calm. "Audio clear. Stay sharp. Any movement." "Not yet," she whispered, pretending to rearrange her produce. But at exactly 10:17 a.m., the lion stepped into the den. A tall man in a striped senator wear, clean-cut, smiling too much. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a banker, which made him more dangerous. He stopped in front of her table and picked up a chili pepper. "This one go hot well," he said casually. Ada Aura forced a smile. "Well, if you're brave enough, you fit chop 'em raw." He laughed, too loud, then leaned closer. "You're friends with Chitty, ABI?" Ada Aura swallowed hard, but she didn't blink. "I know many people." The man smiled wider. "Be careful the kind of people you know, Auntie. Some names come with thunder." Ada Aura's hand trembled slightly as she handed him a black nylon bag. "Thunder only fears those who hide under banana leaves." The man chuckled, but his eyes were cold. He dropped a 1,000 Nigerian Nairas note and whispered, "Tell your butcher friend. The clock is ticking." Then he walked away. Chitty had been watching from a distance. He saw the man, saw the posture, the timing, the look. He followed, through the narrow market paths, past the Akara stand, past the meat section, out into the main road, and into a tinted black Corolla. But before Chitty could reach it, the car drove off. Fast. Too fast. Later that day, in the warehouse safe house, Chitty and Obiagelu reviewed the footage from a hidden button camera Ada Aura had worn. Obiagelu paused the screen on the man's face. "I know this one," he said. Ex-SARS officer. Name's Clement. Now works for Natazi as a cleaner. Cleaner. Not someone who sweeps the floor. Someone who wipes people out. Chidi stood up. His fists clenched. They've crossed the line. Obiagelu looked up slowly. No. They've drawn the line. Now it's up to us to step over it. And so, for the first time in 10 years, Chidi Martins made a decision he had avoided for too long. He would no longer hide. Not behind a butcher's apron. Not behind Adaora's smile. Not behind Obiagelu's strategies. He would strike first. Because sometimes, the lion doesn't just wait. Sometimes, the lion roars. In the animal kingdom, they say the goat is weak, docile, obedient, predictable. But they forget, even the goat has horns. And when pushed too far, even the butcher's knife can slip, and the goat can bite back. That night, Chidi Martins didn't sleep. He sat alone on the roof of the warehouse, staring into the night sky as generator smoke twisted through the air. His thoughts were not of meat, money, or revenge. His thoughts were of Amaka, and a small boy named Ibube. Somewhere in Abuja, they were probably fast asleep, peacefully unaware that war had already begun in Enugu. On their behalf, Obiagelu walked up the stairs slowly, carrying a folder. Inside the folder were names. Bankers, lawyers, hitmen, drivers, even a local pastor. All of them connected to Uncle Natazi. You ready? Obiagelu asked. Chidi didn't look at him, just nodded. We're not playing defense anymore, he said. It's time to make them uncomfortable. Obiagelu smirked. I already started. That morning, the entire city woke to something it hadn't seen in years. Front page headlines. And right there in bold black letters on the Enugu Sentinel, questions arise over Martin's dynasty fire. Was it really an accident? And just beneath that, a photo. Grainy, but clear enough. A security camera still from 10 years ago. Obiagelu had found it, buried in old archives, labeled unprocessed. It showed a man, dark suit, bald head, walking into the warehouse minutes before the fire started. Not a firefighter, not a staff member, not a family friend, but Clement, the same man who had threatened Adaora at the market. The city started to whisper. At 10 a.m., Chidi walked into Uwani Market dressed like a man who had nothing left to lose. Black shirt, no apron, clean shave, eyes like fire. He didn't come to cut meat today. He came to be seen. The moment he stepped into the open, a hush fell over the traders. Mouths opened. No words came out. Adaora ran to meet him. Chidi, what did you do? The market is buzzing. People are saying your name again. He looked at her. I didn't do anything. He turned to face the crowd. I'm just telling the truth. At that exact moment, inside a glass-walled office in Independence Layout, Uncle Natazi crushed a glass in his bare hand. Blood dripped down his fingers. His assistant stood frozen. Natazi's voice was calm, too calm. Call Clement. Sir. I said, call him. The assistant nodded and dialed fast. But Clement wasn't answering, because Clement was already on the run. Obiagelu had moved faster than anyone expected. He leaked footage of Clement's offshore account, the one paid for by a shell company linked to Natazi's wife's cousin. Then he hacked an old voicemail, one where Clement's voice said, make sure the boy dies in the fire. No witnesses. No loose ends. But the boy Chidi hadn't died. And now the loose end had become the noose. That night, Chidi and Obiagelu sat in a dimly lit room, staring at a map of Abuja. Red pins, blue strings, circled names. Tomorrow, Chidi said, I go to her. Obiagelu nodded. Once you step into Abuja, everything changes. You sure you're ready? Chidi picked up a small envelope from the table. Inside it was a photograph of Ibube. He smiled at the boy's crooked teeth, his big ears, his curious eyes. I'm not ready, Chidi said softly. Then he looked up. But I'm going anyway. Because there comes a time when even the goat stops running. And when it turns, it charges with everything it has. They thought he wouldn't rise again. They thought he'd rot in that market forever, surrounded by blood and bone. But what they didn't know was that Chidi Martins had one more city left in him. And this time, the butcher wasn't coming to beg. He was coming to collect. The journey from Enugu to Abuja wasn't long, but in Chidi's mind, it felt like years. Every bump in the road, every village they passed, every checkpoint, it all echoed one thing. She's alive. She's waiting. And your son, your blood, breathes. He sat in the back seat of an unmarked Sienna. Obiajalu was driving. A quiet man named Femi, their security contact, sat in front, watching the road like a hawk. Nobody spoke, because some journeys don't need words, just purpose. Back in Enugu, Adaora stood at her stall, trying to pretend things were normal. But nothing was normal anymore. People still bought pepper, still gossiped, still laughed. But every time a black car passed by, her heart skipped. Because now, she was no longer a background character in Chidi's story. She was part of the reason he was fighting. Meanwhile, deep in Abuja's Kubwa district, Amaka was threading a needle in her small tailoring shop. The fan was turning slowly, moving just enough to stop sweat from forming on her forehead. Ibube, her son, was sitting on a small stool nearby, drawing with crayons. His tongue stuck out in concentration. He looked just like Chidi did at that age. She didn't know that, though, because for 10 years, she believed Chidi was dead. And what's worse, someone had made her believe it. That someone? Uncle Nadazi. He had told her Chidi died in the warehouse fire, told her to hide, told her it was for her protection. But protection is a cage with soft pillows. And Amaka had been caged for a decade. By evening, Chidi and Obiajalu arrived in Abuja. No hotels. No flashy arrival. They stayed in a safe house behind a dusty primary school, where generators roared louder than dreams. Chidi didn't eat, didn't change. He just stared at a printed image of Amaka's shop. Tomorrow, he said. I see her. Obiajalu raised an eyebrow. Are you ready for what she might say? Chidi didn't answer immediately. Then, if she spits in my face, I'll wipe it and still say thank you, as long as she's alive. The next morning, the air in Abuja was thick with harmattan dust. It clung to clothes, to hair, to memories. Chidi walked through the narrow street leading to the tailoring shop, dressed like an ordinary man. Baseball cap, slippers, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. He stopped a few meters away, and then he saw her. Amaka, 10 years older, still beautiful, still calm. She was helping an old woman adjust the wrapper on her waist. She laughed gently, the same laugh. Chidi's hands trembled slightly. Then a small voice called out from inside the shop. Mummy, my drawing is finished. And then the boy ran out. Ebube. Chidi's knees almost gave way. He looked exactly like him. Exactly. The ears. The nose. Even the way he squinted when the sun hit his eyes. Chidi stepped forward. Slowly. Carefully. But Amaka hadn't seen him yet. She turned to the boy and said, Stay inside, baby. I'll be with you soon. Then, she looked up and saw him. Her hands froze. The wrapper she was folding dropped to the ground. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She blinked twice, once for disbelief, twice for confirmation. And then, in a whisper only she could hear, Chidi? He didn't smile, didn't move. He just nodded. Once, softly, It's me. And Amaka fainted. They say fire destroys, but fire also reveals. When it burns away everything false, what's left is either truth or ashes. When Amaka collapsed at the sight of Chidi Martins, it was like the universe itself paused. The boy Ibube screamed, Mummy, and rushed to her side. Chidi moved fast. He caught her head before it hit the concrete, held her, felt her weight. She's real. Not a memory, not a photograph, not a whispered prayer from a butcher's bed at midnight. She was real and alive and breathing in his arms. Obiajalu arrived within minutes. He had been parked nearby, just in case. They carried Amaka inside the shop, poured cold water on her face, opened the windows, and waited. After a few minutes, her eyelids fluttered. She looked up, eyes foggy, confused. Then, the memory returned. Chidi, she whispered. He nodded again. This time, no words, only tears. Not from him, but from her. She pushed herself up, hands trembling. What is this? Are you real? Or am I dreaming? Chitty knelt beside her. His voice was rough. I thought you died in the fire. I thought you did, she whispered. I came back that night. I saw the flames. I saw your scarf on the ground. They told me you were dead. Chitty, she shouted. They said your body was found. They made me leave Enugu. They said it wasn't safe. Chitty's jaw clenched. Who said? Amaka wiped her face, staring at him like she was looking at a ghost. Natazi. It was him. And one other man. I don't know his name. Bald quiet. They said everything was gone. That I had to disappear. Obiagelu stepped forward, face hard. Clement. Chitty stood slowly, fire dancing behind his eyes. He turned to Obiagelu. Everything we suspected. It's worse than we thought. Meanwhile, outside the shop, across the road in a small Kiki Napep, a man pretending to eat roasted corn adjusted the lens of a hidden camera. He had seen everything, captured every word, and he was already texting his boss. Target reunited. Woman alive. Boy confirmed. Back inside, Ibube was sitting on a low stool, watching the grown-ups talk. He didn't understand it all, but he knew this. The man who looked like him, the one who spoke gently, and had the same nose as him, made his mother cry. Not in fear, but in relief. Chitty sat beside the boy. Hi, he said softly. Ibube looked up, suspicious. You're the man that made my mummy faint. Chitty chuckled. I didn't mean to. What's your name? Chitty. A pause. Then the boy asked, Are you my uncle? Chitty looked at Amaka. She was silent. So he turned back to the boy and said, No, Ibube. I'm not your uncle. I'm your father. The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt like the earth itself stopped spinning. Ibube looked confused. He looked at his mum. She nodded. Tears again. But not weakness. Release. Outside, Obiagelu's burner phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. A voice on the line said, So the ghost has returned. Good. Let him come fully into the light, so we can burn him again. The line cut. Obiagelu pocketed the phone, turned to Chitty, and said, They know you're here. They're coming. But this time, Chitty wasn't running. This time, he had something to protect, something to fight for, something to reclaim. When a man loses everything, he either becomes nothing, or he becomes dangerous. And now, the butcher they thought they buried had come back, with blood in his eyes, and a family to protect. The day after the reunion, Kubwa didn't feel safe anymore. Not for Chitty, not for Amaka, and certainly not for a 9-year-old boy who had just learned the truth about his father. Chitty sat in the back room of the tailoring shop, his arm around Ibube, while Amaka tried to stay calm. But something had changed in her. She wasn't just crying anymore. She was angry. They lied to me, Chitty, she said, pacing. They stole 10 years of my life. They stole my son's father. Chitty nodded slowly. They tried to steal my future too. But we still have time, and I'm not letting them take one more second. Obiagelu entered the room. His face was hard. No smile. They're closing in, he said. I intercepted a call. Natazi's men have been in Abuja since yesterday. They're not here to talk. Amaka grabbed Ibube's hand instinctively. Chitty stood up. What's the move? Obiagelu pulled out a USB stick. This is everything. Evidence of the fire. The cover-up. Clement's offshore accounts. Bank transfers to shell companies. The voice note. Once this hits the right channels, Natazi is done. Chitty narrowed his eyes. What do you need me to do? Obiagelu handed him a folded paper. An address. Tomorrow morning. Media house in Maitama. High-level editor. We give them this. They do the rest. Amaka looked nervous. They won't just let us walk in and hand it over, will they? Obiagelu shook his head. No. They'll try to stop you. One way or the other. That night, as they prepared for what could be the most dangerous day of their lives, Chitty pulled his son aside. Just the two of them. Man and boy. Father and son. Ibube looked up at him. Daddy, Are you leaving again? Chidi's chest tightened. He knelt down. No, my son. Not this time. Ibube looked at the ground. Do I look like you? Chidi smiled. Exactly like me. Even your stubborn face. Ibube giggled. Then asked, can I be brave like you one day? Chidi put both hands on his shoulders. You already are. You didn't even cry when you heard the truth. That's courage. The boy nodded, then whispered, I don't want to lose you. Chidi hugged him tight. You won't. I promise. But the next morning, that promise was tested. On the way to the media house, just 5 minutes from their destination, their vehicle was cut off by a black SUV. 3 armed men jumped out. No questions. No hesitation. Bullets flew. Chidi, Obiagelu, and the driver ducked. Chidi grabbed the USB from his bag and shouted, Take the boy. Obiagelu kicked the back door open and shoved Ibube out through a small alleyway behind the buildings. Run. Find the yellow building with the flag. Give them the flash drive. Ibube took off, heart pounding, legs shaking, but not stopping. Inside the car, Chidi rolled out with his own weapon. A small pistol Obiagelu had given him the day before. He wasn't trained like a soldier, but he didn't need training. He needed reason. And his reason was running through the streets of Maitama, clutching a USB full of truth. Meanwhile, 2 of the gunmen chased after Ibube. People screamed in the streets. Horns blared. Okadas scattered. But Ibube didn't stop. He ran like his name. Ebubechukwu, the glory of God. He found the building, bright yellow, with a small green flag. But just as he reached the front gate, one of the men grabbed his shirt. He screamed. Then a shot rang out, not from the gunman, but from behind. The man collapsed, and standing there was Amaka, shaking, holding a revolver with both hands. The other gunman saw her and fled. Ibube ran into the media house, crying but determined. I have something. They tried to kill my daddy. Please, someone take this. A security guard pulled him inside. A journalist rushed forward. They plugged in the USB. And as the files loaded on the screen, videos, voice notes, wire transfers, the journalist looked at the boy and said, Who gave you this? Ibube wiped his tears. My father. And in that moment, the Martin's name, once thought dead, became headline again, not as a scandal, but as a storm. When a name dies, it's mourned. But when a name rises from the dead, it becomes a weapon. And now, for the first time in a decade, the name Martins echoed through Nigeria's airwaves again, this time, not as a fallen dynasty, but as a reckoning. The USB had made it. The boy had delivered it. The truth had escaped the shadows. By 7:30 a.m., the files were already trending across Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp statuses. People everywhere were watching the same video. A grainy security cam clip. A man entering the Martins family warehouse at 10:47 p.m., the night of the fire. That man? Clement. On screen, the timestamp was clear. The world saw it. Then came the voice note. Make sure the boy dies in the fire. No witnesses. No loose ends. The voice? Analysts confirmed it. Nadazi Martins. Phones rang. Offices went quiet. TV anchors stuttered. Lawyers opened dusty files with trembling hands. Because when the elite fall, the ground shakes. In a private lounge in Asakoro, Uncle Nadazi was having breakfast when the broadcast played on the flat screen. His fork dropped into his plate. The guards beside him froze. Sir, it's trending. Everywhere. He stood slowly, walked to the window. The streets were already murmuring. He had been exposed. Years of silence, payoff, and intimidation. Undone by a butcher and his son. Back in Enugu, Ada Ora watched the news in her small room, hand over her mouth. She whispered, Chidi, you did it. The market square was already erupting. Nah, that butcher way wear gold watch. He no be ordinary man oh. I talk him that time. Him I no be market man I. The people who once mocked him were now chanting his name. Meanwhile, in Abuja, Chidi was in a hospital bed, shoulder bandaged from a bullet graze. Amaka sat beside him. Ibube was curled up, fast asleep in the chair next to them. Obiagelu walked in, his face tired but triumphant. "It's done," he said. "Interpol has issued a notice. Natazi can't run." Chitty nodded weakly. "Good." Obiagelu looked at the boy sleeping in the corner. "You know, you didn't just fight for justice, Chitty. You fought for inheritance. For your son's future." Amaka reached over, held Chitty's hand. "You didn't come back as the man I lost. You came back stronger." Chitty looked at both of them and said softly, "I didn't survive all that to stay silent." But silence wasn't in the cards for Natazi. By noon, EFCC trucks had pulled into his mansion. TV cameras recorded everything. Clement was already in custody. When reporters shouted, "Do you have anything to say about the accusations, sir?" Natazi only muttered, "That boy should have stayed in the market." But the world had already replied, "That boy is now a man." And as the Martins' name returned to headlines, courtrooms, and boardrooms, the enemies who thought they had buried it now had to kneel before it. Most men leave the market when they rise. But sometimes, a man must return. Not because he's fallen, but because he remembers. 2 weeks after the arrest of Natazi Martins and the public disgrace of his criminal empire, Nigeria was still talking. Court proceedings had begun. Properties were seized. International accounts were frozen. The media dubbed it the Martins Resurrection. And in every paper, every screen, and every whispered conversation in hair salons and beer parlors, one name came up over and over: Chitty Martins. But Chitty didn't care about the noise. He didn't want applause. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted one thing: peace. He had moved Amaka and Ibyub into a quiet house on the outskirts of Enugu. Nothing too flashy, just space, light, and silence. Amaka had reopened her tailoring business, but now with staff, machines, and orders flowing in faster than she could stitch. And Ibyub? He now had his own room, his own desk, and a father who tucked him in every night. One sunny afternoon, Chitty stood at the window, holding a glass of Zobo. He watched as Amaka arranged fabric on the clothesline, watched as Ibyub kicked a deflated football up and down the dusty compound. Then his phone buzzed. "Obiagelu, you're not going to believe this," the voice said, laughing. "They want to name a street after you in Enugu." Chitty snorted. "I just wanted to cut meat in peace. Now they want to put my name on a signboard. Bro, you're a folk hero now. Your face is on t-shirts. There's even a Nollywood director trying to buy the rights to your story." Chitty smiled quietly, then replied, "Tell them to wait. I have something to do first." The next morning, just as the sun pushed past the clouds, Chitty Martins walked back into Uwani Market. But this time, he didn't come with a knife or blood on his apron. He came in a clean white shirt, black jeans, leather sandals, and quiet confidence. And on his wrist, not the Rolex, just a plain watch. Because today wasn't about flash. It was about roots. The moment the first trader saw him, the shouts began. "Nah him. Nah the butcher billionaire. Chitty, Chitty, the market lion. A beg sign my pepper bag." Even the children, who once called him Uncle Goat Smell, now ran to hug his legs. He smiled, shook hands, even helped a woman lift her sack of ugu into a kiki. Then he made his way to one stall. Adaora's. She was selling pepper like nothing had happened. Wrapper tied, chewing gum in her mouth, and that familiar eye roll already loading. She looked up as he approached. "Well, well, look who remembered us ordinary people." Chitty laughed. "I never forget where I came from." She handed him a pepper. "Hold this. Nah memory." He took it, smiled, held it to his chest, then whispered, "Thank you, Adaora, for not turning away when everyone else did." She blinked fast, then looked away and muttered, "Abego, you one make person cry inside market." They both laughed. Then Chitty turned to the crowd and said, "I may be a Martins, but I'll always be your butcher." And the people cheered, not because of his money, not because of his name, but because he had walked back into the dust and chaos of the market, and reminded them, greatness doesn't mean forgetting where you bled. The world only remembers the fire that destroys, but it forgets that some fires are not there to burn you. Some fires exist to forge you. And when that fire fades, what's left is not ash, but iron. 3 months had passed since the name Chitty Martins returned to the streets, the screens, and the hearts of his people. The case against Natazie was airtight. Clement had turned state witness, and the Martins family empire, once buried under soot and scandal, was now rising like the morning sun. But Chitty? Chitty wasn't chasing boardrooms. He wasn't giving speeches. He wasn't attending the galas thrown in his name. He was building something quieter. A school. Not in the rich parts of town. No. Right there behind Uwani Market. Next to the abattoir where he once dragged goat carcasses before sunrise. The Martins Foundation for Forgotten Children. Funded entirely by Chitty. Because he remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. And he was determined that no child in Enugu would feel that again. One Saturday morning, while Ebube ran through the empty school halls, bouncing a football, Chitty stood on the rooftop, watching. Beside him, Amaka sipped kunu, her scarf blowing gently in the breeze. "He looks free," she said softly. Chitty smiled. "Because he is." They stood there for a while, no words, just presence. Then Amaka asked, "What do you want now, Chitty?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Peace, quiet, a place to raise him, and maybe one more." Amaka chuckled. "NN? You think one child is enough to stress me?" They laughed. But beneath that laughter was healing. Later that evening, Chitty returned to the market one last time. Not to work, just to sit. At the old wooden bench where it all began. Same spot, same dust, same air. He sat alone, watching the sunset paint the sky above Enugu in orange and gold. Then, from behind him, a voice called out. A little boy selling pure water. "Uncle, them say you be billionaire, but you still day here. Why?" Chitty turned, smiled, pulled the boy close and said, "Because this is where I remembered who I was." The boy stared, then nodded, and ran off, and Chitty sat back again, silent, but not empty, because now, the fire no longer haunted him. It had forged him, from butcher to billionaire, from forgotten to father, from ashes to legacy.